the headline of this story is just mind-blowing.
Because this was a story, I don't even know how much has been covered on the station so far. So the Cap Times had a year-long investigation and found that the State Department of Public Instruction investigated more than 200 Wisconsin teachers, aides, substitutes, and administrators from 2018 to 2023 who were accused of sexual misconduct or grooming behaviors towards students. So this was information they're saying was previously unknown to the public. This is it's a very well reported story. We're trying to get the reporter Danielle DeClose to come on the show this week to talk about what went into investigating this. And there's multiple levels of this that I am frustrated with because first and foremost, this is the number one thing that we need to be like as a parent. And I'm someone who I am the type of person who I trust you until I don't, right? Like I probably am overly optimistic about human nature. And when I drop my kid off with someone, I always assume best intentions. And I am not a highly suspicious person of other people, for better or for worse. And so when I think about trusting teachers, trusting the people who have signed up to teach our children, take care of our children, protect our children, I give them the benefit of the doubt. Until you hear a story like this, of the amount of people who have signed up to work with kids and some of these stories that are inappropriate texting, are inappropriate touching. And there's a wide variety of what these cases are that require investigations, right? When there is a complaint, it requires an investigation. And then it also requires to make sure that there is follow-up to make sure these people, when they're found to be, whether it's negligent, guilty of what they're accused of, cannot be in schools again. I don't want to keep talking if you have something to say.
No, it's physical, verbal, and electronic. We have to think about the electronic piece as well. And just looking at the federal numbers, if we take them down to Wisconsin, which is what we're going to focus on, 1 in 10 students experience sexual misconduct from educators during their K-12 schooling. That number for Wisconsin, if you take the federal average, 93,000 school children.
So it's a really big deal, and we need to be talking about not only the accountability for how this happened, how it continues to happen, but also how we're going to fix it. And there is this report or this investigation already spurred conversations in the legislature to be talking about having actual laws in the book when it goes to grooming, how the Department of Instruction has to deal with these cases, because their point of view on this is that they had asked for more money in the last budget to improve systems, improve software for their tracking, and that was declined by the Republicans in the legislature. And my point is, this story by itself, if we knew that this was going on, whether it's Jill Underly or the entire DPI, trying to justify that they needed money to improve either having more people to be able to investigate these cases, because according to them, they only have one full-time person and another part-time person who are in charge of, along with other job responsibilities, of investigating these cases. And investigating these cases, as you imagine, takes a lot of time. And so having more bodies and more actual resources to doing these investigations, and if the Republican Joint Finance Committee is saying, no, we're not going to fund this, you take this to news reporters and make a really big deal out of it. If I'm Jill Underly, I am raising the flag before this story breaks last year during budget saying, listen, this is a big deal and we need more resources to address this, and they're not letting us. And the fact that she didn't start back then, this still falls on her. And the fact that she's not giving comment. She's been asked to testify, and she better get up there and testify. Otherwise, I don't see her having a career after this. I don't know how she comes out of this.
This is maddening to me, and it's a pattern of how she does this job as a superintendent of public instruction, where she just ignores the media. Requests for information, requests for interviews. You work for us. You're not a private company where you can do those types of things if you want to. I would suggest you still should participate in a public conversation about your business. But she is ignoring requests for information about something. Here's the facts of this story. 461 teachers investigated in the last 5 years, roughly. 207 of them kept their credentials and continue to work in schools with children.
Well, and an investigation is just that, right? That's what an investigation does. If there's an accusation, it does not mean it is guilty automatically, right? If the investigation goes as planned and you are found to have done no wrongdoing and you get to keep your license, fine. But the other part of this is the fact that if you drop your license, they drop the investigation. And so then there's people who lose their license, but it is not listed as to why they gave up their license. That creates a lack of transparency of knowing who these people are, especially if they get hired at a school where they're no longer teaching because they don't have a license, but they get to do a different role at the school.
Look, if there's a legislative piece of this, yes, but you got to make the argument. You can't ignore that argument and just pretend like the spokesperson, Chris Butcher, said that it's because the agency is limited in funding. The state lawmakers consistently cut their operating budget. Then you need to be loud and proud about why that's the case.
You need to be much louder about that, because there's no parent who reads this who then doesn't get angry that there's not enough funding to make sure that there's not predators and groomers in our schools. You don't just say, well, we got our funding cut.
And the fact that Jill Underly continues to decline requests, the Cap Time is not a hostile news organization to anybody. I mean, come on here. This is ridiculous. And the fact that you're responsible for our system of education in the state of Wisconsin, and you can't ask basic questions. And I'll take it back to what happened in Milwaukee when she was asked over and over again, how did you not know this? How did you not know they were having financial problems? She constantly was uninformed and uneducated. She goes, I think her direct quote was, you'll have to educate me on why that's happening. You're in charge of this. That demonstrates a pattern of incompetence that we should not have.
I've never worked in the Department of Instruction, so I don't know. But I do know that to a large extent, when we elect executives, whether it's the county executive, whether it's a mayor, whether it's a governor, they have entire staffs around them that are doing a lot of the policy work, that are more experts, and that gets filtered up to the figurehead, whose job it is largely to communicate to the public, right? When we're talking about David Crowley, he had never been a county executive before, and so when he gets that job, there are people around him who help him do that job effectively. Right. But the buck stops with him, because he is the county executive, and he's the one who's going out there and communicating with the public on what the county is or is not doing. Same thing with the mayor, same thing with the governor. And so her job as the head of that department is not to hide behind her spokesperson, is to be able to communicate what the Department of Instruction is actually doing or not doing, and not to hide every time she is asked by the media to comment on what is happening.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but during the last election, she basically hid as well. She did. She didn't want to do anything other than what she basically had to do to be a viable candidate. So Jill Underly, Superintendent of Public Instruction, this is an epic fail. It's on you, and you better start answering the hard questions about why this is going on, because if you have sexual abuse of children, those children grow up at some point, and all the research, all the data suggests that a screwed up child, because of how an adult interacted with them, becomes a very screwed up adult. No surprise, we see that on display, full display, every day in this country. That is an epic fail from our Superintendent of Public Instruction. And yes, we said it. And oh, by the way, she's welcome to come on this show and defend herself anytime. So that's our formal invitation. Jill Underly, how about coming on and talking about your side of the story? And please don't use I don't have enough money. That's worn out. And if you want to make the argument you need more money, you come on the air and you talk about it.